All right. Thanks, folks. And I appreciate you attending this instead of ice cream. So I know where I rank. That's a big vote of confidence. So, what I'm going to be talking about is extended threat, how your browser betrays you. And it's a discussion on browser extensions. A little bit about me. So, I have a deep interest in helping security teams of all shapes and sizes. I've been working at MSSP before. I've done a lot of security automation in the past, but really my focus is just bringing solutions to as many people as possible. I'm a big foodie. I love baseball, and I've just launched a tool recently to help teams manage browser extensions. So, hence the talk. Um, if you're not familiar with what browser extensions are, they are these hidden little apps that you install into your browser that extend functionality, and they are hidden in this little puzzle piece icon at the top right of your browser. They're incredibly easy to install. It's just a couple clicks from the Chrome Web Store, Edge, Firefox. All these web stores have browser extension functionality. And really, all that they are just little pieces of JavaScript programs with access to information that the browser gives it through APIs and other functionality. These browser extensions update automatically, so you will always have the latest code that the developer wants you to be running. The extensions call back to the web stores, and they're just like, is there a new version? And if there is, the new version's pushed down. And yeah, as I mentioned, just generally available in stores, but you can also sideload extensions. You can have a developer version loaded in. All of that's really flexible. But why do browser extensions really matter? And to me, what the core piece is that browsers cannot be everything to everybody. So you can't have all the functionality for every website that you want to work with. And so developers have started creating browser extensions to extend things like Salesforce, HubSpot, ChatGPT, all these other sorts of things. But also work now happens outside of the usual security boundaries, the traditional security boundaries. So when you used to be able to stop an attack at the firewall or through web proxies when we were all in an office, now all of this work happens decentralized at somebody's house and generally through identity and access through Okta or SSO. And so, okay, one, we lose the traditional tools like firewalls and proxies. And now we just depend on EDR. And so we have these tools like CrowdStrike and all the other endpoint monitoring that we have baked into these things. And we take that for granted that they're going to detect these types of attacks with like browser extensions or anything that happens in the browser, but they aren't endpoint EDR tools aren't managing what's going in the browser specifically. And I think a big trend across the industry or across threat actors has been a focus on info stealers and session hijacking because it bypasses modern ways of accessing tools. So where you used to have like an allow listed IP, that's not possible anymore when you're working from home. So being able to capture your session through Okta, GitHub, anything like that, it's really hard to track. These SaaS vendors don't provide a lot of really great logging to say where this authentication session came from. And so if a cookie or another piece of authentication material gets captured, you don't really understand how it did or where it gets replayed from. That attacker just has access to this valuable information now. So a couple things about like issues with browser extensions. So extensions are maintained by so many different types of developers. While you want to believe that each extension is maintained by a real company and is very reputable, a lot of it's just hobbyist type development and people working on things as a side project who are often blown away when their side project ends up taking off and gets hundreds of millions of users or hundreds of thousands of users. There's also no notifications when updates occur. So, like I said, these updates just happen passively in the background. But when you think about it from an organization or a company standpoint, uh, you as an admin don't understand when this update has been pushed out to all of your browsers, And so, all of your like change control processes or your understanding of like what software that you're actually running, that just happens silently in the background. Right now, management of extensions in a company is not really easy. So you can use things like Chrome Enterprise Core, a couple other tools, but really being able to allow list, block list, anything like that is there's very few tools out there to really help admins do this effectively. And there's little transparency into how extensions actually work. So you don't ever see the code. You just kind of go off of what it claims to do in the Chrome Web Store or in any web store. And you assume that it's going to actually carry out that purpose, but it has really sensitive access to a lot of things. And I think what it all boils down to is these extension stores are ran for consumers, not enterprises or real organizations. So what might be okay or what might fly for a consumer, any general individual, doesn't actually work for an enterprise organization that has different controls on their data. And as proof, here's a couple of news articles that go back to 2014. So browser extensions are nothing new. They've been out for I don't know 12 years now at least, and they've been they've taken a bunch of different versions and flavors of types of attacks, but they're all wide ranging of like you know extensions being sold to other users, a new user taking it over, pushing malware, all the way to North Korea creating tradecraft and like starting to target South Korean developers using browser extensions, right? So the we have the full gambit here of just run of the mill attacks to a nation state actively producing attacks using browser extensions. How browser extensions work, in essence, is they request permissions. So, a browser extension by default does not have access to anything really in your browser. When you install it, you have to allow it permissions, right? And permissions look like this tabs. Tabs is one of the permissions. And when you look at like Google documentation, when you use the tabs API, you just interact with a browser tab, right? So just I have 1,000 of them. You would think that like this API just allows you to create, modify, or rearrange tabs, right? That this is the specific definition by Google, but it can also take screenshots of the active tab. So that's not exactly like listed there. That's not really apparent to any user. And only when you get deep down into the documentation do you find that like this is a capability. When you install an extension, this is basically all that you get. And so they try and merge this consumer view of what a extension permission looks like and give that to users. And you say it says something like can read and change data, all your data on all websites. Now it sounds pretty scary to me, and I think it is, but in order for this extension to work, it needs this permission. And so I really want to use Ghostery, and so I'm just gonna like hit that add extension button, no problem, right? Now, this is a very broad permission and it can interact with just all data now. And so if Ghostery were to ever be taken over, that is like a transitive property or, hacked or anything like that, that goes on to all the other uh, code that exists, those permissions I've now provided Ghostery uh, to be able to do that. So what do we get with that? We get an attack that was kind of kicked or like the public awareness was known by a disclosure from a company called Cyberhaven. That and it started like their disclosure, their attack started on Christmas Eve. So very opportunistic. They knew everybody was gonna be not be working that day. And this is kind of my origin story for like getting involved with it. I did a lot of research into this particular case, but it all kicked off when I was at Half of Half down off I-35. I don't know if anybody knows what that is, but it's just a discount store. And I get this message from a friend. And he's like, "Sorry to bug you if you're still on holiday." Mind you, this is 2 days later on the 26th. Um, he wanted to find if I had historical versions of a extension. And so he wanted to look for version 24.10.4 and no more information about it. That was that's the extension ID of Cyberhaven. And what I hadn't known at the time, this just kicked off my spidey sense, but what I hadn't known at the time was that Cyberhaven was starting to notify some of their customers saying that one of their developers was compromised and a malicious version of the extension has been pushed out. So what's really interesting here is that he's obviously a customer. He didn't have access to this version of code, right? So when you push a new version of code to the Chrome Web Store, the historical versions get removed and are no longer there. And so he couldn't even do a forensic artifact. They had already pushed out a couple new versions removing the malicious code, and he couldn't really do IR or any incident response to know how significant his impact was at his company. So he needed to get the previous version, and luckily I had it. But going back to how this attack happened, so there were around like 22 extensions where developers were being targeted with these phishing emails saying, it was a notice from the Chrome Web Store, this is fake, but it says you have irrelevant keywords in your product, you must fix this now or else your extension is going to be removed from the Chrome Web Store. Well, so Cyberhaven is a security DLP company. Their entire company works off of a browser extension. So if their extension were to be removed from the Chrome Web Store, their company is basically just like not functional for that time period. So obviously the urgency here is, at its highest, and you can imagine a developer just clicking in and, well, the link in here sends you to an OAuth consent form with phishing. That's trying to phish for a specific permission to edit, update, or publish Chrome Web Store extensions. And so when you hit continue, you basically give permission to privacy policy extension, which was the attacker, in order to update and control the extension in the Chrome Web Store. So with that, the attackers had already kind of profiled the type of extension that they wanted to attack and target with these phishing emails. And they were able to push out a new version of the code, which, since Cyberhaven already provided the ability to access and interact with cookies on all websites, they knew that they could just insert this line of code to get all cookies for a domain and then start exfiltrating those out of an organization. So not only was it this like supply chain through a security vendor that did DLP and would have access to sensitive data, but it also, kind of transfers out to all of their customers. So just with Cyberhaven alone, 400,000 people had this extension updated and started grabbing cookies for any domain as defined by N. So really nasty attack. The total compromised stats is that, like, in this attack, there were 20 extensions successfully taken over, even more targeted that were just unsuccessful. Developers saying, hey, I got this phishing email, I deleted it, but this is really fishy. In total, almost 1.5 million users impacted with this. And what's really crazy is there's a very early indication or a very early code pattern that I found that dates back to May 31st of 2024. So this code had existed in the Chrome Web Store, maybe in very specific cases, but nobody really knew to go in, analyze it, understand what it's doing until Cyberhaven put out their notice around like Christmas time. And what's even more scary is that there had been removals of other extensions with this code pattern from the Chrome Web Store September 29th, 2024. So somewhere along the line, Google had identified that this was malicious code, had taken it off the Chrome Web Store, but that signature or that pattern didn't necessarily like cascade down. Even more telling, even after Cyberhaven had a notification out, everybody was doing IR on this. There were more extensions that were updated with malicious code. There was more phishing attacks that were successful 6 days after Cyberhaven went public. So that signature, like I wrote a signature detecting this code pattern, this malicious behavior, and then more extensions kept getting compromised and updated through the Chrome Web Store um, as they kind of went along. So, um, kind of goes to show that there's a gap here in like these massive providers of these web stores being able to keep everybody safe. Um, and I'm just going to give like a little demo of about what the Cyberhaven extension would do. So, if you've never seen like a malicious browser extension, this is about as bad as it gets. And like mine isn't in the Chrome Web Store; it's just developed locally, but the same code patterns and same ideas are completely valid here. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on Evil Extension, and what this extension does is it looks for my browsing activity, takes screenshots of the pages that I'm visiting, and then it also grabs my cookies and sends them off to a third-party server. I'm just running it locally, but I could host this wherever I really wanted to. And through this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sign into GitHub. I'm going to log into GitHub with a passkey, so about as phishing resistant, top tier authentication technology that we have today. And I'm going to go to the source code, the crown jewels of my organization, GitHub, and start accessing that. Well, so what the browser extension is doing in the background is it's taking screenshots of everything I'm going to, and it's watching. I went to the crown jewels, the source code, right? But that's not all, because I'm also taking cookies from my authentication session. And if I go to GitHub in this private browser, ironically, I'm going to use an extension to replay my cookies, but I'll import them. And if I just refresh my page, now I'm me, right? So these identity attacks are really nasty. I don't know where you go to GitHub to look for this log or whatever. Maybe it comes from a different IP and all that. But the point here is that with all these tools and all these very sensitive things, if you have a browser extension just watching in the background, it can start dumping these sessions for everything that you're going to, exfil them off, and depending on if the tool or the provider has like restrictions on this session replay, then that's really what it comes down to in preventing this attack. So super nasty. And then that's what essentially Cyberhaven was doing, minus the screenshot piece. Um, I alluded to this a little earlier, and we saw the news article, but ownership transfers are a big deal with the Chrome Web Store or just any of the extension stores as well. So, again, being very focused on developers and like consumers and being able to get solutions out to people, the web stores are very much incentivized to have as many extensions as possible and maintain a large ecosystem. And I think that really like lays into how ownership transfers work and being able to like transfer a extension from one person to another. Um, what I'll just say is like, there are even websites up right now that allow you to buy and sell extensions. So this is Extension Hub. I've seen that the going rate for an extension is about $1 for every 4 monthly active users. So if you have 400,000 users, you can buy an extension for $100,000, and or like that's about the rate. These extensions come in all different shapes and sizes, but they all have these permissions that are already allowed by the users, right? And so I thought to myself, well, what if I just bought one of these extensions, and what if I wanted to like push malware out to people? Like, could I actually do that, and how easy would it be? I've obviously seen that it's possible through like other research and news articles, but like it has to be much harder than it seems, right? So I emailed one of the developers. I couldn't find a way to even buy it through Extension Hub, and so I just emailed somebody directly, and I said, after some back and forth, trying to pay $50 for the extension, it only had like 5 users or so. She it ended up that they just gave it to me for free. So really what this all like kind of comes to is I paid $5 for a developer account in Google and then asked somebody if they would give me their extension, which is already approved, already has permissions justified to Google. They've already like gone through a lot of trouble to get their extension published, and then they just handed it over to me for nothing. And so what did I do? Well, I used their existing permissions and I set up a traffic manipulation rule. And so whenever my friend went to secureannex.com, I would redirect them to a rickroll, right? And so like I was able to do this overnight and I said, "Hey, the new version's live. Go to my website and see what you find." And so you got rickrolled. So yeah, absolutely effective. This maybe took a week and a half of work, $5. Um, and yeah, I had my own extension. Now you think like maybe this isn't really that malicious or that bad or anything like that, but this is a example while I was doing my own like extension purchase, I was looking at the other extensions that were on Extension Hub, and I was tracking this one too because I had 400,000 users and it was for sale for $100,000. And somehow the person that purchased this extension posted on Twitter and said that they took out a loan in order to buy the extension, which was pretty wild. Um, but you have to imagine now this person needs to make that money back based on this extension. It's an ad blocker, like that's great, but you can imagine that an ad blocker has a lot of really sensitive access to somebody's browsing history. And what ended up happening is only like 30 days after he acquired the extension, he started putting in like a tracker, and it hasn't gone like full bad yet. But you know, if you were to use this ad blocker, all of your browsing history is basically being sent to him, and he's probably selling it to an ad tech company, and you know, it has the possibility of getting a lot worse really quickly. Um, and this is just kind of how it like ends up going when a browser is, when an extension is sold. So there's a lot of extensions that are open source tools that have an open source version, but also are published to the Chrome Web Store. And so I found this example of somebody that has an open source browser extension who ended up selling it, and then their users started noticing malicious behavior, tried to contact the developer. He said, "I sold it a long time ago. Sorry, closed, completed," right? So not a lot of empathy there. And users are really out on their own. And there's a stark difference between what is shown on in like GitHub if you have a open source extension, what's actually on the Chrome Web Store. Um, there's also an issue of like the visibility of extensions. So there's three primary ways that you can see extensions in the Chrome Web Store. There's public, unlisted, and shared. And so public, obviously, you can find them. They're accessible to everybody. There's also unlisted, so they're not indexed by a search engine and they're not searchable by in like the Chrome Web Store. And then they're shared, so you would be able to share access to one specific individual user. But attackers have started setting extensions as unlisted and started to target individuals to install this specific extension, which generally is phishing or something like that. But it makes it really hard for IR teams to be able to find that extension and be able to say, okay, like they have this one installed. You have to know like the specific ID in order to access the page. And so knowing this, I was working with a customer of mine, and how my tool works is it will monitor for changes in extensions, but you have to give me a list of IDs. A couple of them stuck out as weird because they were featured. So they're like, um, they have a different status in Google saying this is a featured extension. So like a gold star or like a rubber stamp saying this is a good extension, but they were also hidden. So they were not visible to a general search. And then they had like hundreds of thousands of users. So something didn't add up there. And digging through it all, I ended up finding 58 extensions with 6 million total installs by users. with similar code patterns that all were tracking users, but they weren't visible in the Chrome Web Store. So how does the extension get that many users when nobody can actually find it, right? This is an example of how what that looks like. So if you were to go search for this ID or search for the name, you would get no search results. But if you go view the extension by URL that you can kind of piece together, knowing the ID, you can see the extension has 100,000 users, good rating, add to Chrome right now. So it is alive and it is available. Just you can't find it by search. Well, maybe you've seen some of these before, but how these were actually being delivered were through malicious advertisements. So this is from Google Ad Transparency, and the same company that is promoting sports bras is also trying to get people to install extensions to protect online searches, right? So this is how these extensions get delivered ultimately, is that through advertisements, they will get a user to install these extensions thinking that they'll be more secure, but really they're just tracking the behavior that these users are going through. And you can imagine like this is capturing internal URLs that they're accessing through SSO or anything like that. And all of this is being exfiltrated out. But let me give you some like actual strategies for working with browser extensions. So there's three main paths that you can take. Allow all. Congrats, most people are doing that right now. If you have never thought about this before, you can block all, which you can have like a small allow list and prevent anybody from loading all extensions. Usually, you'll need to do this through Chrome Enterprise Core or group policy. And then you can also do block and approve. So you can have your block list, you can have your small allow list, and then again through these tools, you'll have to think through like how do people request new extensions as you go along. Sometimes that isn't enough though, because like how do you actually know? I have a number of examples of how these extensions can be malicious deep down. How do you actually know what the extension that it purports to say that it does is actually doing that underneath? Well, there's some enrichment tools out there like spin.ai, and Google provides one built into their browser management. I don't know. I'll just kind of like leave this up to a guessing game in one way or another. But we have this piece of enrichment that says this has 10 million users. It's a 50 out of 100. It's been updated pretty recently. Has been in the Chrome Web Store for quite a long time. Has decent reviews. Has over 30,000 reviews. But it's 50 out of 100. Now, I don't necessarily know what 50 out of 100 means. It's obviously improved since the past version, but I don't know like how am I supposed to discern like what that actually means, and should I allow this in my organization? Well, this extension is actually uBlock Origin, and if you were to ask me, this is probably one of the most trusted extensions out there, right? So these enrichment tools that are just providing a number or just providing surface level detail about what these extensions do, they're really hard to help users, analysts come to a real conclusion on if this browser extension should be allowed in their organization. Now, uBlock Origin does ask for a lot of permissions, a lot of sensitive permissions to all browsing data, and it wouldn't take that for granted. It could be compromised, but it tries to follow as many best practices as possible, and kind of this is the most installed extension in the Chrome Web Store. So because of that, I ended up building Secure Annex, and so it's free to use, just sign up tool that provides immediate code and behavior analysis powered by AI. It picks out all the URLs in the extension and begins to enrich those and say, all right, across all the web store, which extensions are using these URLs, or what piece of code is going out and contacting these URLs to potentially exfil data. I'm alerting people on meaningful changes such as ownership, visibility, permissions, and I'm also giving tools for hunting. So you'll be able to find like large groups of related extensions and be able, if one extension does not give you cause for concern, you'll be able to see maybe this suspicious indicator, I want to search the rest of the Chrome Web Store and see, is it related to any other suspicious extensions that exist. So I'll just get into that real quick of what it looks like. So you'll be able to come in here, you'll search an extension. There might be a verdict that applies to it. You'll be able to see if it's still active in the Chrome Web Store. So you'll be able to see the history. You'll see all the other versions. You'll be able to download it, so you don't have to like install it yourself and in order to analyze it. And then there's a bunch of tools down here that there's a AI analysis that says, okay, this proxy tool is removing the content security policy headers for all traffic. So this would be able to strip a lot of protections that web servers would give a user, and now this extension can start injecting code through the proxy in order to perform malicious clicks or other things like that. There's manifest ratings, URLs, and then it also does a code review, so you're able to like look deep down into the code, or at least provide some direction on where you should go look if you were to perform your own assessment. So not only is there a high-level summary of what is going on in the extension, but you'll also be able to see that this is modifying headers and setting the value to nothing. And beyond that, you can also begin browsing through the extension files, so you don't have to download it yourself. You can start analyzing the extension if you really want to. There's also these pivoting opportunities, so you'll be able to see like this perm hash. This is a hash of the permissions requested by the extension, and this is developed by Mandiant as a way of like threat hunting extensions. But you'll be able to query across all of the Chrome Web Store and see, are there any other extensions that match this perm hash? And I was able to find Thunder Free VPN for Chrome. Hilariously, it gets updated on the same day, even though it has different owners and a bunch of other different things, different versions. But when you get into it, this extension ends up doing the exact same thing as the FVP one, modifying headers, removing content security policy, and setting a default free setting people to a default free proxy. One thing that you should know is that free VPNs in the extension store are not actually free by any means. Another thing that I'll just touch on really quickly is this ability to watch for extension changes. So I give everybody the ability to monitor 2 free extensions, and you can set up a watch of a browser extension that you have in the Chrome Web Store, and it will alert on events like ownership changes, if a verdict was applied, if a new version came out, if it gets removed from the Chrome Web Store. Sometimes those, like a extension getting removed from the Chrome Web Store, does not cascade down to users immediately. So you'll want to know if extension was pulled, and then manifest changes if a extension starts requesting new permissions of the user if the manifest changes significantly. So just to wrap everything up, I think that browser extensions are a really overlooked part of security right now and pose a significant risk to uh, user identity authentication and how the world has kind of shifted to be able to trust based on identity. But these session tokens, once they're grabbed through a protected browser, it can bypass things like passkeys, 2FA, all sorts of stuff. Most organizations lack the tools in order to like really understand a browser extension or be able to evaluate one at scale. So I'm hoping that my tool will provide the ability in order for teams to do that. And I think the only way that we'll actually like kind of deal with this problem is through proactive analysis. It's not just like I looked at this extension one day and I was able to say that it was good or bad, but over time, that extension through its life cycle changes significantly. And one day it could be fine, and the next day that it might not be. So definitely something to watch out for. This is my contact information. If you need, try to make the QR code as big as possible. But that'll take you to the website. And yeah, appreciate you all listening to me. Cheers.